Welcome to the daily devotional once again. Today I want to reiterate the truth that the message of grace is at the core of the gospel. Gospel means good news. There's more than enough bad news in the world to go around. Let me remind you that grace is a free gift. It is unmerited. I like what New York City pastor Timothy Keller says about grace, quote, "We need to remember that we are saved by grace when we fail. We need to remember it much more when we succeed," end of quote. There is a truth here that when we do the will of God, we are the servants of God, and we really have nothing to boast of in our service. Rather, we need to remind ourselves that our position in kingdom service is itself something unmerited, which we have freely received. Listen to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 28. "Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us have grace, by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear." The kingdom itself is not ours because of what we achieve, but because we believe and what we have received in Christ. Timothy Keller states again, God sees us as we are, loves us as we are, and accepts us as we are, but by His grace, He does not leave us where we are. This gives us hope in a world that is fallen, and we ourselves far from perfect. And perfection is one thing that we would desire. Paul states in Philippians 1:6, "Being confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will perform it or perfect it until the day of Christ." It's the tension between the now and the then of the gospel. Now, Paul says, we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now we know in part, we prophesy in part, but one day we shall know, even as we are known. We struggle in a world that is imperfect. At the turn of the calendar year, who would have or could have foretold such a worldwide pandemic? Everything is turned on its head, and we suddenly appreciate much more what we had in light of our current circumstances. So, with everyone else, we desire for better days. I believe, however, that God allows these setbacks and sufferings in all of our lives to remind us of how truly dependent we are upon Him as creatures with limited time in this world. Timothy Keller writes, "The Bible's purpose is not so much to show you how to live a good life or have a good life. The Bible's purpose is to show you how God breaks into our lives, even against our wills, and saves us from sin and brokenness, which otherwise we would never be able to overcome. Religion tells you if you obey, you will be accepted. But the gospel sets a different standard that states, if you are absolutely accepted and sure you are accepted, only then will you begin to obey. Those two things are utterly different things, and every page of the Bible shows the difference." I believe Timothy Keller is absolutely right. The gospel really is about God's amazing grace. Again, he writes, "When we grasp that we are unworthy sinners saved by an infinitely costly grace, it destroys our self-righteousness and our need to ridicule, or I would add, belittle others. If we truly believe God's grace is amazing and extends toward us God's unmerited favor, then more people will be convinced when they see the reality of it in our lives." A final quote from Keller states the ultimate truth. God's reckless grace is our greatest hope. Listen to the words of the familiar hymn once again. "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. John Newton describes his own conversion experience. He came to the knowledge that he was a sinner, under judgment, worthy of death, eternal separation from God, but he found grace was truly amazing. Verse 2, listen to the words. "'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed." John Newton, writer of that great hymn, Amazing Grace, had a time when he came to the realization of just how great God's grace is. Have you believed that God's grace toward you is truly amazing? God bless you.